Hey everybody, Tom Barnes here. Stories from the 78. Being a kid is tough, man. You don't know what to believe. You just believe what your parents tell you because that's what you do. And you go through life doing the things that they want you to do and learning the things they want you to learn. Then you get a little older. You meet different people. You realize that not everybody's like your family. And that could be a good thing. It could be a bad thing. Either way, when you grow up as an evangelical Christian, there's a very regimented rule set of what to believe, what not to believe. So imagine if you're a kid going to Bible camp and then learning about all the scripture that is evangelical Christians, and then you marry somebody, you're both on that same path, and then you start to realize the world might be a little bit different than what you were taught. You know, you go to different schools, you meet different people, you meet people that are gay, you meet people that are queer, trans, whatever the case may be, and then you realize, well, all these people can't be going to hell. That's ridiculous, right? And then you come to find out, you move into the Boystown neighborhood back in the 90s, which is now North Halstead, and you meet like-minded people that are very progressive, that are accepting, which is a very new concept in the late 90s. And then you realize that you're a beard. What does that even mean? Beard is somebody who you date to cover up your sexual orientation. My friend Kelly Lundquist, she had that happen with her husband that she'd known since she was a kid in Bible camp, married in Chicago, and he turns out to be gay, and she finds this out. All happening at once. And she has an amazing story to tell. She's here now for this story from the 78. Kelly, how are you?
I'm doing well, thanks.
Good to talk to you. And you are a former Chicago, and you mentioned before we got started here, three separate times.
Yeah, so the first two times are like technically sort of not quite all the way true. So the when I was a kid, my dad went to grad school in the at Wheaton College, so we
Oh, yeah.
lived in grad school housing there.
The Bible
I
Belt
came
of
into this.
Illinois.
That's right.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, we came in. I went to Lowell Elementary there for 2 years, and we came into the city to Field Museum for
Hmm.
field trips and stuff like that. And then the time that the book tells about in 2003, I lived in Boystown, and then about 6 years after that, my boyfriend at the time, now my second husband, was in grad school at Loyola, and so I would go and kind of spend summers and Christmas and stuff with him there. So I was there for like 4 or 5 months a year.
Got it. And now I read that you have like a nice small red house along the Mississippi River. Is that right?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I lived in Minnesota, so yeah, just outside the Twin Cities.
Yeah, where the Mississippi River starts. A lot of people don't know
That's
that.
right.
I was curious one day and went looking for it.
Yeah, the Indigo Girls famously taught us all those years ago. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So you have your debut book. It's called Beard, and
yeah.
which is it's bold for being a debut novel from anybody. But you really got personal. Now, before we get started more, I just want to show the cover,
Oh,
and I'll
okay.
show it electronically as well. But um, it is a book that I think a lot of people would be terrified to write, but you
Mm,
you went out there and you did it and you talk about it, and you even like the opening line there is about it like this sounds like a joke, but it's true because
right.
you were like dressed as Liza Minnelli at a gay bar in Boystown
Yeah,
when you found
yeah.
when your husband was outed to you.
Yes.
And
So if anybody remembers, anybody who has Boys Town memories, there was a bar called Cocktail, which is sort of a double pun in this context. And it
no.
was on the other side of the street from Roscoe's. As I remember it, like I was just in Boys Town a couple months ago, and it's been closed for many years now, and so I was like I was trying to find where it had been on the street, like in my mind.
Uh-huh.
I can picture where I remember it being on Halstead, but
I remember Roscoe's. That was a good time.
yeah, for sure. And yeah, there's a lot of those places, like in the book, like Berlin is in the book. There's several places that were kind of iconic.
Yeah.
Sidetrack was there,
Yeah.
so a bunch of places that were pretty iconic at that time make little appearances in the book. And there's a
Yeah.
lot of food in the book too, so like Melrose Diner is there, and Clark Street Dog, and all little places
All
in
the
that
great,
area.
yeah, and now it's not even called Boys Town anymore. Now technically it's called North
I
Halstead.
know.
Isn't that crazy? I mean,
Yeah,
to
I
make it
know.
more inclusive, obviously. But
Sure, absolutely,
um, so
absolutely.
so talk about your story, if you will, just and without giving
Sure.
all of it away in the book. But I mean, this goes back to like, did I read that you were growing up at some point were you considered evangelical?
Oh yeah, for sure. So yeah, that's really kind of like my ex-husband and I both grew up in that world. So
Hmm.
you know, we met at a Christian summer camp in 1997, and it was just one of those things where we pretty much instantly bonded. And I think a lot of that resulted from both of us feeling kind of like outsiders, and it felt like everybody else kind of had their stuff figured out and knew who they were and knew why they were there and believed, you know, sort of, you know, unconditionally in all the things that we were supposed to believe in.
Hmm.
And of course, you know, that was our perception. I'm sure those people had a lot more reservations and doubts, and you know, than they presented at least.
Sure.
But we kind of felt like we bonded. Like the third night, I think that we had even met each other. We stayed up until like 5 o'clock in the morning, just talking about life and doubt, and you know, all of
All
our questions and stuff
all
like
the
that.
things that you do with like your first
Yeah,
love, right?
absolutely. Yeah,
Mhm.
so totally. And you know, over the course of the summer, we you know just bonded, and then we he lived in Oklahoma, I lived in Mississippi, where I grew up, and he grew up at right outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma. And you know, we had a long distance friendship that became long distance dating, that then became we got married. And you know, I think for both of us, we just didn't really know, like coming from that context, any other way to be with a person that you were in love with, and
Mhm.
you know, in many ways, than to you know date them and marry them. Like we just
Sure.
didn't have a conception of anything kind of outside of that. And so
Especially with
we
those
got
morals,
married.
right? Like the
Oh,
morals
totally,
of
yeah.
growing up. I worked for an organization that dealt with the evangelical Christian community a lot, so I'm familiar
Wow.
with it. I wasn't one, but I'm a lapsed Catholic in Chicago, which is a lot of us, but I can understand a little bit of what you're saying as far as the
Yeah.
values of the church growing up.
Hmm.
And I imagine that
Yeah,
shaped
for
you
sure.
with marriage, relationships, how you're supposed to be in a marriage and all those things.
Absolutely. Yeah. All of my views of gender and sexuality, you know, growing up were very much shaped by church, as well as just like what, you know, how a life is supposed to look and what role church is supposed to play in your life, and, you know, all of that. I mean, honestly, just kind of like a way of seeing the world that was very like absolute and categorical and binary, and, you know, like everything. There's good, there's evil, there's heaven, there's hell, like all of that
Mhm.
is literal. Um, and so that definitely informed, you know, my view of myself. And essentially, like over the course of our marriage, you know, about 3 years into it, I sort of started to piece together that my ex-husband, like he had talked a lot about the therapy that he had been in for like most of his adolescence.
Like conversion
And then
therapy type things?
yeah, it was conversion therapy, so that actually
Really?
was what it was.
Oh,
And I
wow.
didn't know that. So I didn't know that when we were dating. I didn't know that when we got married. I didn't know that until about 3 years in.
Oh,
And so
wow.
essentially, like the last,
That did you know
it
what
took a
it
lot to find
was
out.
though? Like as a how old were you at this time?
Um, so at that time, I think I was 22 or
So
23. I
you're
mean, we
still a
got married when
kid.
I was 20 years old. You know, I was
Oh
really
my
young.
gosh.
Or I guess I was 21. I take that back. I was 21.
So in what
Um,
year-ish?
so we got married in 1999.
99. So yeah, very much
Mhm.
still, I mean, it wasn't what it is today.
Not at all.
But
Yeah.
conversion theory was a thing, so much so, and it was a lot
Hmm.
of it organized by churches, which is just
Yeah.
when you educate yourself and know about churches and the Christian
Yeah.
value, you understand why those things are there. Regardless if you believe it or not, you at least understand
Yeah.
why they exist, how horrifying they
Hmm.
are, but you understand why. So,
Absolutely.
did you
Yeah.
understand the severity of what conversion theory was at that age when you guys were what you said
I
3
did
years into it?
not honestly like, and I this is you know part of the book. Like I you know learned about it you know over the course of the marriage, and then you know much more so honestly after the marriage when I had you know kind of the detachment from it to read about it and research and you know kind of understand that better. I've talked to other friends who've been through it, and you know had some conversations, but yeah, at that point, you know, I didn't really understand. And so essentially like the last 2 years of the marriage were like a process of me. I had already kind of begun to sort of deconstruct from the faith tradition that I grew up in. And that's a lot of the book too, honestly, is just kind of my like not even just my deconstructing from faith, but my coming to kind of a different sort of awareness about the world and the way that I thought about things. And a lot of that had to do with like grad school and just kind of being exposed to new things and new places. But by the end of our marriage, we were living in Boystown. I was getting a PhD in queer theory, and you know, all of my best friends were gay men, and all of that was happening. And that's part of the context of like the irony or the tragicomedy, I guess, of the real situation, which is that I was, in this context, and I was still kind of missing some pretty major major
Well,
signs from my
but
ex. So
I
yeah,
imagine though, growing up in the kind of household you did with the religion you did, it's not as easy as one would make it sound to see things, right? Because you
yeah,
taught, like you mentioned earlier, about heaven and hell and who goes there and who doesn't go
hmm
there. And I bet you couldn't even fathom the thought that you have a husband, or you had a husband at the time, who would go to hell if he was gay, right? Like that probably
oh,
just didn't make any
absolutely,
sense. Like, no, that's just not a thing, right? He knows he's gonna go to
yeah.
hell, so why would he be gay, right?
Right, absolutely. And I
Yeah.
think too, like there was also this piece of just trusting the judgment of your own experience, like because I think one of the things that this is like a lot of information.
No, it's all right. It's
I think
why
one of the
just
things
us
that
girls talking. It's okay.
I love it. But I think one of the things, that I believed about the world at that time was, okay, gay men are XYZ. I had all these sort of like definitive things that I believed would be obvious and true. And I think that's part of like me playing with the tropes in the book is like we have
Yeah, you
these
mentioned
very
that right at the
like
top. Yeah.
linear, kind of things like a gay man will do this and you
hmm
obviously know that he's not actually
You've
gay.
seen
But like,
that portrayed in movies, especially like
oh,
in the early
absolutely.
'80s, is what you're referring to, right?
Absolutely, yeah. The
Yeah.
90s, like SNL girl with no gaydar, like all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. Like it's very like this is very obvious, and she's just missing it because she's dumb, kind of thing. But he and I had sex like regularly, like up until the end of our marriage. And he's not bisexual. Like he's a gay man. Like he's been very happy like in his life like since our marriage,
hmm
and has only been with men since. But that was just one of many things, right? That was like, well, here's my experience, and this doesn't align with these other things that I've been told have to be true about gay men. So, there were these missing pieces of that puzzle that I figured, it would have to sort of like fit in order for that to be true. So yeah, there was just, a lot that I didn't see, a lot that I didn't see kind of on purpose, honestly, because it's,
Well, sure.
I think a lot of us have those things that we're just kind of afraid to lift up, the rock or whatever and see like what is our reality. Actually, like there's stuff that you're afraid to say because saying it kind of makes it true. And I
Absolutely.
think that was, his experience a lot too. Like once he said those things, especially to me, that was kind of a permanent, line of demarcation that we couldn't like cross back from, and it would have made it true for him in a way that he was able to kind of like defer knowing about for longer than maybe, either of us should have.
So how the irony is not lost on me that you guys were in Boystown at the time. How did you end up in Boystown? Was it just because, I mean, you were 99-ish to 2000,
Hmm
so Boystown was a hot neighborhood back then. I mean, that's
Oh
like kind
yeah.
of when that whole area was like kind of what like Humboldt Park or Logan Square is now.
Yeah.
That's what that area was
hmm
like back then. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. No, totally. Yeah. And I just ate in Logan Square with my brother. My brother lives in Chicago now in Lincoln Square,
Oh
Ravenswood.
yeah, just
But
directly west. Yeah,
well, exactly. Yeah, yeah, totally. Um, but yeah, I think that, the Boystown thing essentially it was cheaper than Lincoln Park, right? And what we
yeah.
wanted, because both of us were coming from places that we just wanted to be in a big city. We
hmm
wanted to be in a big city and we wanted to feel like a big city. And, my school was in Rogers Park, but his work was downtown. So it was
Sure.
a little bit more equidistant for both of us. So there was like a geographical logic to it, but it was also like hipper than Rogers Park. So like we could have gotten a cheaper apartment like further north, Edgewater, Rogers Park, like whatever. But we were kind of like, well, just we're moving to a big city. We want it to feel like a big city. So we
Absolutely.
lived just like basically right off the Belmont stop. Like you would literally like
Oh
walk down and it was that big intersection of Clark and Halstead, or Clark and Halstead, where there used to be a huge Blockbuster. Like it was a
yeah,
magnificent
down the street
place.
from Berlin nightclub as
Yes,
well.
exactly.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
was
So yeah, I mean it was magic. Like I just every day I like woke up and I would stand on the train platform because we sold our cars. So we were just like taking the train and buses and stuff. That was like pre-Uber.
ab-
Um, I mean, obviously taxis existed, but
yeah, well, of
we
course.
mostly just took the train and and bus. And that was another factor, honestly, as well as we knew that if we went further west, it would be potentially more challenging to just we knew that if we were right off the red line, that would simplify things at least in terms of somebody where we would be.
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir. I moved my first place in Chicago was right at the two houses from the Taco Bell at Addison and Clark.
Oh my God, yes, of course. I love
Yep.
that.
Yeah, the Blue
I've been to
House
Taco
is
Bell
I
many
think.
times. Oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
So let me ask, so you eventually find out, and I would love for you to tell the story how you found out, but
Yeah.
before we get there, like you find out that your husband that you've been married to at that point for
Mhm.
5 years?
Yeah, we were married for well, so we were married for we were together, like living in the same place for 4.5 years, and then we were separated for 6 months before we like officially divorced. So like technically, it's like 5 years because we got divorced literally on the anniversary of our fifth anniversary was when our divorce papers were
Oh,
finalized.
jeez. So
Um,
you find out, and it all,
mhm.
like, I imagine it's like what some maybe people can think about, like when they've seen it in movies, where like your literal world starts crashing down. So are
Yeah.
you then mad at yourself for not knowing, mad at
Oh,
him for
yeah.
not telling you, or mad at the church for telling you how to perceive the world and people that are gay? Because now somebody that you
Hmm.
love, for most of your entire adult life, now is somebody that, according to the religion that you grew up with, now is
Hmm.
going to be like damned to hell. That's
Yes.
not funny, but like in the moment,
No,
it's a
totally. Yeah.
lot to grapple with. Like I can't
Yeah.
imagine that. Like where were you?
Yeah. That's such a good question. I mean, so, you know, I think at the time it was easier to be mad at him.
Mm,
There was definitely, I mean, he and I are really close now, and and have always had a positive relationship, largely because of how things ended. Like they ended really well with us, and that's a big part of the story too. But one of the things that at the time that I felt was definitely mad at him, right?
mm,
Because there felt like no matter what motivated him, at the end of the day, he like made decisions to like go, like be with other people when I didn't know about it. Like there were things that he knew I didn't know and he didn't tell me. And so I think at the time there was an element of that that felt like an intentional betrayal that felt like, and so there were, yeah, definitely like, being honest, like I was mad at him. I also was very bad at myself, you know, um, and I was certainly like, I was more confused, honestly, than anything else. Just that sense of like, once something that feels like kind of an essential underpinning of your experience is gone, once that kind of leg of the stool like falls off, you're like,
yeah.
how much of this was real? How much of my life has been real? It kind of like forces you to question like all these other things along with it.
Yeah, I imagine, like,
Um,
where do you go from there as far as your belief system going forward?
totally, yeah. And honestly, that was, I mean, and if I'm nailing it down to like one or two primary reasons that I wrote the book, I think that's a large part of it because this is the experience that like more than any other changed the trajectory of my life and like made me a person that I'm much more proud to be now. Like I know what I believe, like that. But that process was that experience was essential for that. And like my brother came out like 10 months after I got divorced, and I think that that experience too was also really essential in like shaping. Like I felt like part of what was happening like repeatedly and often was all of these stories that I'd been told about sexuality and God and gender and hell and all of that were just slowly kind of falling apart, slowly being like, contradicted by my lived experience regularly and often. And it was like shaping me into a completely different person. And just, yeah, I couldn't go back, essentially.
Yeah, no, and it's funny you say that. I have a friend who grew up evangelical Christian, and
Hmm.
his parents are in Thailand, as
Hmm.
missionaries, and he's not a he anymore. He's a they,
Yeah.
um,
Hmm.
and they talk about that struggle and having parents
Yeah.
that still believe that their child is not going to the same
Hmm.
place they are after they're
Yeah.
done with this plane that we live on Earth. And
Yeah.
they talk about it in such I it was an incredible moment. We ended up going to a trip to Israel for some work
Oh, wow.
where we worked, and they shared all this information, and it's incredible because they grapple with what you're talking about, like everything that you knew as a kid.
Hmm.
How do you figure that out, knowing what you know as an adult, and how to deal with it and make peace with it and still have a relationship with your parents? And I imagine you
Right.
figured out a way to also deal with that. I mean, if your parents are
Hmm.
still in that realm, I imagine your brother had to go through similar things, you know, that you did, even though you're not the one who like came out, but you are the one that
Mm,
had, you know, that has the brother and now has the
mhm.
ex-husband, which also is not a good thing to be, you know, just getting divorced is not a good thing, let alone getting divorced for
Yeah.
reasons that you guys got divorced. I
Mhm.
imagine it was just, man, I'm exhausted thinking about it. Just, I can't imagine. I mean, I don't mean to make light of it because it's not funny at all, but at this point, there's only one thing to do but laugh because you came
Yeah.
out in the end, you know, in a great way, right? I mean, you're still friends with your
Yeah.
his name's Devin, is that correct?
Yes, yes. So that he allowed me to use his name
Yeah.
in the book, which was incredibly great. But yes, he, you know, some of the names have changed, but his name is the same. And yeah, I mean, I think, you know, a lot of that, you know, one of the things that's been beautiful to watch, honestly, has been the way that my brother's experience has changed my parents. You know, like my parents are completely different people
Well, that's a
now
relief.
than they were a
They've
decade
come
ago. And
around,
you know,
as we say.
honestly, then even too, like it was more, they were always sort of on the fringes of that anyway. Like my parents were always, my dad was a community, he was a clinical director of a community mental health center for like all of his career. And
Hmm.
my mom worked in elementary schools and was a dyslexia therapist. So both of them were in these professions where they were constantly seeing how people were left out, you know, and marginalized and vulnerable and stuff. So I think they were already like pretty prepped for, even having come from like a more conservative background, like I think they were already like always questioning things and never really like just like lining up like doctrinally like with everybody else.
Hmm.
Um, and so, you know, over the course of, you know, especially like the last, I would say 10 to 15 years of, you know, all the things that, all the things that we all know are happened politically, you know, my parents have especially like gone like much, you know, further, into like much more progressive ways of seeing that stuff. So, it's been really beautiful to watch. And I'm really, you know, just because they're in their 70s, you know, like that's not an easy thing to do when
No.
you're older to continue to change and grow and ask questions and be willing to speak up, you know, to people that you've been around your whole life and you know won't agree with you. But yeah, that's been a really beautiful thing, I would say, honestly, to watch. That certainly has not been the case for everybody, you know,
No,
and
of course
even in the
not.
story,
No.
you know.
No, life is life and
Yeah,
everybody has a different
yeah.
one. Has your brother and your ex remained
Mhm.
friends through all of this?
You know, my brother, I don't. It's really interesting, actually. It's really interesting actually because I'm going to be like next week is the launch, right? So Thursday night I'll be at Roscoe Books in Roscoe Village, and my ex and my brother are going to be in the same space for the first time since all of this happened.
Oh,
So
so
he's
not so
coming
much
to,
is what you're saying.
yeah, not, I
They've
mean,
worked
you
on it.
know, but it's also just like they're really different people. So like even you know beyond just sort of like the history or whatever, and that being maybe complicated, um, it's it's more just that they you know
Yeah.
don't
Well,
have like similar
they're both on their own
friends.
journey, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Yeah,
Did
for
he
sure.
did your
Yeah,
ex
there's no like bad blood or anything at all.
I'm just curious, did your ex-husband ever reach out to your brother when he was coming out, or did he kind of just let him find his own path through his people that he
He,
leaned on?
I think they, you know, at that point, and it's interesting too, like all the people who were defensive on like my behalf, my brother was one of the most defensive. He just wanted to protect me, you know. So I think he
Yeah,
felt
of
like,
course.
I think there was some of that like barrier there. I think my ex-husband was aware of that, you know, and just felt it. I think it would have been hard. Like it would have been an awkward thing for both of them, you know,
Hmm.
at that point. I think at that point too, my ex-husband was still very much in his own like who am I, what's happening, like who am I now, who am I going to be, um, like I think that was still very much like in,
So
um,
after going through all of that, in it's a
mhm.
lot to, I mean, that's a couple lifetimes in a short amount of time, but you figured out a way to not only love somebody again, put yourself out there again. I mean, that's not an easy thing. I'm on my second
Yeah,
marriage, and you know, like my first marriage was like my college sweetheart, and that just didn't end.
mhm.
Or that ended because we were just two different people. But in the middle of
Yeah,
that, I was in a relationship that was it was great, and then not, and similar
yeah,
things. A little bit to not somebody coming out, but somebody who just was dealing with a lot of things mentally and things happen to them when they were a child and things come out and you're like, oh my gosh, that, you know, so it puts you through the ringer is what I'm saying. And you went
yeah,
through the ringer of life as well. I mean, it takes
mm,
a lot to then restart that engine to put that trust back into somebody. I mean, was that a difficult journey for you to not only do that, but then be married, to trust somebody, to be married again, and then to put it down in a book? That's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You know, like it's interesting. Like I was talking to somebody the other day that like I went through a phase where, you know, I thought everybody was gay. Like every boy that I met, like I was like, okay, how are you gay? Like let's do it. It's like I went through this phase where I was like sort of like
That's a little trauma coming
overreactive,
out,
you know.
sure.
Yeah. Like there's a line in What's the Nirvana, all apologies, you know, like what
Oh
else
yeah.
can I say? Everyone's gay or um, but uh, but yeah, I mean, I met my second husband. I moved to Boston. When all of this happened, that's kind of the end of the book. I dropped out of the PhD program that I was in. I moved back in with my mom and dad in Mississippi. I went to a summer camp. I taught for a summer in Slovakia, like teaching English. Like I just did a bunch of different things.
Just
And then kind of
cleansing your
on a
soul.
whim. Yeah, exactly. Just
Yeah.
like, yeah, my
Yeah.
little journey. I worked in a bank.
Yeah,
I'm
you
like
gotta do what you
literally
gotta do. I did weird things too in between
completely
all
ill
that.
qualified for
Yeah.
the worst possible banker. But um, but I did that, and then I had a good buddy from the camp that I had worked at who said, "Hey, a bunch of like she was a part of a music school in Martha's Vineyard, and she contacted me and she
Oh,
said like, hey, a bunch of us are going to get a big house in Boston. Would you be interested in joining?" And I was like, yes. Like on before even hanging up, I was like, yes, let's do that. That sounds great. And I have never been to Boston. I came with a like literal single suitcase
it's your
and like
town.
like I'm moving there,
Uh-huh.
so it was great, and that's actually how I met my second husband. He was a part of that music school, and he was literally my like the next door neighbor in the house. Like he was my housemate next door.
And I imagine now
So
you can look back and go, it was all worth it, right? But
yeah,
it's so easy to say that now, but when you're in the middle
right.
of all of that, you're like, is this ever gonna change? Like this
Oh,
ultimately sucks ass. Like this is terrible, right?
absolutely. You're in your. I think that's the other weird part of it is like it feels like, and I've actually had this conversation with my ex-husband a few times, but for both of us, I think it feels like we've had like five or six very distinct iterations of adult life, and I think and I don't know how, you feel about that, but it is weird
Yeah.
that you have like, because I think being married feels like, okay, now I'm done. Like now I'm done with that part.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just going to have this life and I'm an adult and I pay bills and I have a gas, bill to pay and I have, all these different, I have a car and, oil needs to be changed and all this sorts of things that adults
Yeah.
sort of think about, and I started that at 21 and then I was done with it by 26. So, when I moved to Boston, I was 28 and I was just
Still a
kind of
kid.
like, did I just, yeah, but
Yeah.
also like, have I lost 8 years of my adult, and
Yeah,
so
of course. But
what was,
yeah, I mean,
yeah, but what was lovely about that time, honestly, was it felt like in a way that I had never really allowed myself to do as an undergraduate, I was able to just sort of like go out and see my friends play music and do all these things that I think most people do when they're undergrads and they're not like super Christian and like worried to like be in a bar or like all those
right.
things that I
You
was a
had
little
your
bit
early
more
20s and possibly late teen years in your late 20s.
exactly
Yeah.
exactly that.
I can very much sympathize with that. Just my first marriage, very much what you're describing about not be able to
Yeah.
do any of that kind of thing, or not to the level
Yeah.
that maybe one needs to do at a certain
Hmm.
point in their life. I got to do it later in both almost around the same timeline, which is interesting as we're talking here. But I don't want to take more of your time or give away the entire story of your book. But the book is Beard, and it is coming out the next week, right? You have a book launch party. Why don't you say
Yeah.
that?
So yeah, we have a party on October 30th. I'm going to be meeting with my editor, actually, who is a wonderful, brilliant writer herself. Is a brilliant editor. Like I cannot say enough good things about her. But her name is Lisa Ann Cockrell, and her parents actually live in the Chicago suburbs, and she lives in Chicago as well. So it's nice because like she's local. And yeah, we're gonna have a release party at Roscoe Books. There's gonna be snacks. There's gonna be like fun things. And we're just gonna talk about the book. I'll read a couple short passages, and then I'll be signing books.
That's
So yeah,
great.
I think it's at I can't remember if it's 6:30 or 7. It's one of those two times.
I just get there
Or maybe
early
it's
either way.
online.
And you know what? Take that time to reminisce and walk and visit a couple places on Halsted Street, right?
Oh, absolutely, for sure, no doubt.
Well, Kelly, thank you so much for taking time to
Yeah,
chat with
thank
me.
you.
I really appreciate you just being willing to chat with me, a stranger talking about your book here, but I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye.
Okay.